When a billionaire's empire crumbles, she discovers the one man who can save her is the same man her husband destroyed. What happens when everything you've built stands on someone else's stolen dream? When the truth buried in silence becomes your only weapon? This is a story about power, betrayal, and the cost of choosing what's right over what's easy. A single father, a fallen empire, and a lie so perfect it took years to crack. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The dock creaked under Adrian Cross's weight, each groan of old wood a familiar conversation he'd had 1,000 times before. 5:30 in the morning, and the lake was still holding on to darkness like a secret it wasn't ready to tell. He knelt with his toolbox open beside him, running his hand along a split plank that needed replacing. The wood was soft where it shouldn't be, eaten through by seasons of freeze and thaw that nobody had bothered to stop. He didn't mind the work. Fixing things, real things, things you could touch, made sense in a way most of life didn't anymore. His son Jamie was still asleep back at the house, 6 years old and already learning that some mornings Dad left before sunrise and came back smelling like sawdust and lake water. Adrian preferred it that way. The quiet, the solitude. No questions he couldn't answer, no promises he couldn't keep. He measured twice, marked the cut with a pencil stub he'd sharpened with his pocket knife, and was reaching for the saw when he heard footsteps behind him. Wrong kind of footsteps. Not the heavy boots of someone who worked for a living. These were lighter, hesitant. The click of heels on wood that had no business being there. Adrian didn't turn around right away. He set the saw down, straightened slowly, and only then looked back. She stood maybe 10 feet away, framed against the pale sky like something out of a magazine nobody around here could afford to subscribe to. Designer coat, cashmere probably, the kind that cost more than his truck, hanging open over clothes that screamed money so loud it echoed across the water. Dark hair pulled back in a way that was supposed to look effortless, but took effort to pull off. Pale skin. Expensive watch catching the first hints of dawn, and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to sleep. Adrian waited. He was good at waiting. "Is this your dock?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, practiced, but there was something underneath it, something brittle. "Belongs to the county," Adrian said. "I just fix it when it breaks." She nodded like that made sense, even though nothing about her being here made sense. She looked around, at the water, the trees, the sky turning from black to bruised purple, like she was trying to find something she'd dropped and couldn't remember where. "You're out early," Adrian said. "Couldn't sleep." "That happens." She pulled the coat tighter around herself, though the cold wasn't the kind of thing cashmere could fix. "Do you work here? For the county?" "Sometimes, when they need something done." "And the rest of the time?" Adrian picked up the saw, tested the blade with his thumb. "Whatever needs doing." It wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. But she didn't push. Instead, she looked at him like she was trying to solve an equation she'd never seen before. "I'm Elena," she said finally. "Adrian." No handshake, no small talk, just two names dropped into the silence between them like stones into deep water. "I'm renting the Miller place," she added, "up the road." Adrian knew the house. Big, old, empty most of the year, except when some rich family from the city decided they needed to experience nature for a weekend and then left when they realized nature didn't come with room service. "Nice house," he said, because it was. "It's quiet. That's why people come here." She almost smiled. Almost. "Is it?" "Usually." Another silence. This one longer. She looked out at the lake again, and Adrian went back to his work. He lined up the saw, started the cut with smooth, even strokes that didn't rush because rushing ruined things. The sound filled the space between them, wood fibers splitting, clean and honest. "Why don't you ask?" she said suddenly. Adrian didn't stop cutting. "Ask what?" "Why I'm here. What I'm running from. Everyone else would." He finished the cut, set the saw down, brushed sawdust off his jeans. When he finally looked at her again, he didn't smile or soften or do any of the things people usually did when they wanted someone to feel better. "Some people don't need questions," he said. "They need space." Elena stared at him. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there like someone had finally said something she'd been waiting years to hear and didn't know what to do with it. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking back up the dock toward the gravel path that led to the road. Adrian watched her go, then went back to work. 3 days later, she came back. Same time, same coat. Different haunted look in her eyes, like whatever she'd been running from had gotten closer. This time, she didn't ask questions. She just sat on the bench at the end of the dock, the one Adrian had rebuilt 2 summers ago, and watched him work. He replaced the rotted plank, sealed the joints, tested the strength with his full weight before moving on to the next section. She didn't say a word, just sat there, hands in her pockets, staring at the water like it might give her answers. When the sun finally broke the horizon, painting everything gold and orange and too beautiful to be real, she stood up. "Thank you," she said. Adrian looked up from the deck board he was sanding. "For what?" "For not asking." She left again. And Adrian went back to work, trying not to think about the fact that she'd thanked him for something that should have been basic human decency. By the end of the week, it had become routine. Elena would appear just before dawn, sit on the bench, and watch Adrian work. Sometimes she'd bring coffee, good coffee, the expensive kind from the place 40 miles away that actually knew what they were doing. Sometimes she'd bring nothing but herself, and that look that said she was fighting battles nobody else could see. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. There was something about the silence between them that felt more honest than most conversations Adrian had ever had. On the 6th morning, Jamie came with him. "Dad?" The boy's voice was sleep-rough, confused. "Who's that lady?" Elena, already seated on her bench, looked over. Her expression shifted, something softer, more careful. The way people looked when they'd forgotten what it was like to be around kids and didn't want to screw it up. "Just someone who comes to watch the sunrise," Adrian said, lifting Jamie onto the dock. "Go say hi if you want." Jamie, shy around strangers but curious about everything, walked over slowly, stopping a few feet away from the bench. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Elena said back. "Do you like sunrises?" She considered this seriously, like he'd asked her something profound. "I'm learning to. Dad says they're free, and they're different every day." "Your dad sounds smart." Jamie nodded solemnly. "He is. He fixes things." "I noticed. He fixed my bike last week. And the cabinet. And the—" "Jamie," Adrian called, not unkindly, "let the lady breathe." But Elena was smiling, actually smiling, small, real, like something inside her had remembered how. "He's fine," she said. Then to Jamie, "What's your name?" Jamie Cross. "I'm 6. What's yours?" "Elena Vaughn. I'm 30. Jamie's eyes went wide. "That's old." Adrian closed his eyes. "Son." But Elena laughed. Actually laughed. It sounded rusty, unpracticed, but genuine. "You're right," she said. "It is." That afternoon, Adrian was in his workshop, a converted garage behind the house that smelled like sawdust and motor oil, when he heard a car pull up. Expensive engine. Too smooth for anything anyone around here drove. He wiped his hands on a rag, stepped outside, and found Elena standing next to a black sedan that probably cost more than his house. "Got a minute?" she asked. Adrian glanced back at the workshop, then at her. "Sure." She followed him inside, moving carefully around the tools and half-finished projects that cluttered every surface. Her eyes scanned everything: the table saw, the sketches pinned to the walls, the pieces of furniture in various states of completion. "You build this?" she asked, running her hand along a chair back that Adrian had been shaping for the last month. "Working on it. It's beautiful. It's not done. Still beautiful." Adrian picked up the sandpaper, went back to smoothing the armrest. "What do you need, Elena?" She was quiet for a moment, still looking around the workshop. When she spoke, her voice was different, smaller. "I need to know if I can trust you." Adrian stopped sanding, set the paper down, turned to face her. "With what?" "The truth." And there it was, the thing she'd been carrying alone for however long she'd been here, finally too heavy to hold by herself. Adrian leaned against the workbench, crossed his arms. "I'm listening." Elena pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then held it up. Adrian saw headlines, legal documents, Photos of courtrooms and lawyers and the kind of mess that happened when rich people fought over money. My name is Elena Vaughn, she said. I owned a development company. Hotels, commercial properties, high-end residential. Built it from nothing. 10 years of work. Deals all over the country. Adrian nodded. Okay. I was married. Victor Hale. We divorced 6 months ago. Now he's suing me for half the company. Says he's entitled to it. Partnership, shared assets, all the legal bullshit you'd expect. I'm guessing there's more to it than that. There always is. She put the phone away, looked at him directly. Victor's entire case is built on one thing. One project. A landmark building in Chicago. Mixed-use tower, 40 stories, won awards, made headlines. He claims he designed it. Says his work on that project contributed significantly to the company's growth and reputation. Says he deserves half of everything because of it. Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. Something old and familiar. And did he? He asked quietly. Design it? Elena's expression didn't change. That's what I'm trying to find out. The silence in the workshop was different now, heavier, dangerous. Why are you telling me this? Adrian asked. Because I started digging into Victor's past, his credentials, his portfolio, the work he claimed as his own. She paused. And I found gaps, inconsistencies, things that don't add up. Like what? Like the fact that the real architect behind that Chicago project disappeared 12 years ago. Just vanished from the industry. No more projects, no more work. Like someone erased him. Adrian's jaw tightened. His hands were still, but everything inside him was moving. And, he said, Elena took a step closer. I found a name. Adrian Cross. Graduated top of his class, brilliant designer. Built a reputation in 5 years that most architects spend 20 years chasing. Then nothing. Complete silence. She was watching him now, really watching him. Same name as the guy who fixes docks at 5 in the morning, she said softly. Same name as the single dad who builds furniture in his garage and doesn't ask questions. Adrian looked at her for a long time. Then he turned, walked to the back of the workshop, and opened a drawer in a filing cabinet he kept locked. He pulled out a folder. Old, worn, stuffed with papers he hadn't looked at in years. When he handed it to Elena, his hand didn't shake, but his voice was rough. The project was called Meridian Tower, he said. I designed it when I was 27. Submitted it to a firm called Hale & Associates. They loved it. Hired me on the spot. Victor was the senior partner. Elena opened the folder. Inside were the original sketches, the blueprints, the design proposals, all signed with Adrian's name, dated 12 years ago. 6 months into the project, Adrian continued, Victor asked me to sign some paperwork. Contracts. Standard stuff, he said. I didn't read it carefully enough. Didn't think I needed to. What did you sign? Transfer of authorship. He made it look like a collaboration agreement. Equal credit, shared recognition, but buried in the fine print was a clause that gave him full rights to claim the work as his own. When I found out, I tried to fight it. Lawyers told me I didn't have a case. He had signatures, documentation, witnesses who said he'd been guiding the project all along. Elena was reading the documents now, her expression hardening. This is forgery. Prove it. These dates can be explained away. Victor's smart. He didn't just steal my work. He erased me. Made it look like I was a junior designer who couldn't handle the pressure. Spread rumors that I'd had a breakdown. By the time Meridian Tower was finished, I didn't exist in the industry anymore. What did you do? Adrian's voice was flat. I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my wife. She left a year later when the money ran out and I couldn't find work. Took our son with her. I spent 2 years trying to prove what happened, and all it did was make me look desperate and delusional. So I stopped, came here, started over. Elena closed the folder, held it against her chest. Victor built his entire reputation on your work. Yeah. And now he's using it to steal half my company. Sounds about right. She looked at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the lake, something sharp and certain moved behind her eyes. Help me, she said. Adrian shook his head. I can't. You're the only one who can prove. I tried, Elena. For 2 years I tried. It destroyed me. I'm not doing it again. It's different now. I have resources, legal teams, evidence. You have pieces of a puzzle that a judge already decided doesn't exist. He took the folder back, put it away, locked the drawer. Victor spent 12 years reinforcing that lie. He's untouchable. No one's untouchable. Then you don't know him like I do. Elena stood there, frustration and desperation warring across her face. So you're just going to let him win? Again? Adrian met her eyes. I'm going to protect my son. That's all I care about now. And what happens when he grows up and asks why you let someone take everything from you without fighting back? The words hit harder than she probably meant them to. Adrian felt them land somewhere deep, somewhere he'd tried to bury. Get out, he said quietly. Elena didn't move. Adrian, I said get out. This time she listened. She walked out of the workshop, got in her expensive car, and drove away. And Adrian stood there alone, surrounded by tools and half-finished furniture, and the ghost of a life he'd spent 12 years trying to forget. For 3 days, Elena didn't come back to the dock. Adrian told himself it was better this way. Simpler. She'd go back to her world, fight her battles with her lawyers and her money, and he'd stay here in his. But on the 4th morning, when he arrived at the dock and the bench was empty, he felt the absence like a wound. He worked anyway, replaced more boards, reinforced the support beams, kept his hands busy because idle hands meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling things he'd learned to keep locked away. Jamie noticed. Is the sunrise lady coming back? He asked over breakfast. Don't know, buddy. Did you make her mad? Adrian set his coffee down. Why would you think that? Because you look sad. You only look sad when people leave. 6 years old, and already too perceptive for his own good. She's not coming back, Adrian said gently. She had to go deal with some things. Oh. Jamie pushed his cereal around his bowl. I liked her. Yeah, Adrian said quietly. Me too. Us. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to the house. Not Elena's sedan. Something bigger, darker, more official. Adrian was in the yard helping Jamie build a birdhouse when 2 men in suits stepped out. Adrian Cross, the first one said. Adrian stood, kept himself between the men and his son. That's me. The second man held up a badge. FBI, we'd like to ask you some questions about Victor Hale. Everything inside Adrian went still. Jamie, he said calmly, go inside. Find your trucks. I'll be there in a minute. But Dad, now, son. Jamie went, looking back over his shoulder with worried eyes. When the door closed, Adrian turned back to the agents. I have nothing to say about Victor Hale. Ms. Vaughn seems to think otherwise. Of course she did. She came to you, Adrian said. It wasn't a question. She filed a complaint. Fraud, forgery, theft of intellectual property, made some serious allegations. The first agent tilted his head. Said you could corroborate them. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. The second agent stepped forward. Mr. Cross, we've been investigating Victor Hale for 6 months. Financial irregularities, suspicious contracts. Your name came up in connection with a project from 12 years ago. I don't know anything about that. You designed Meridian Tower. According to who? According to these. The agent pulled out a tablet, showed Adrian images of the original blueprints, the ones from his locked drawer, the ones only Elena could have given them. Betrayal tasted like copper and old wood. She had no right, Adrian said. She had every right. This is evidence in an active investigation. It's ancient history. Not if it proves a pattern of fraud. The first agent crossed his arms. Mr. Cross, we're not here to force you into anything. But if you have information that could help build a case against Victor Hale, now's the time to come forward. And if I don't? Then we proceed without you. But your work, your stolen work, is already part of the record. If this goes to court, your name's coming out whether you want it to or not. Adrian felt the trap closing, felt the past reaching up through 12 years of carefully constructed distance to drag him back under. I need to think, he said. You have 48 hours. After that, we're moving forward with or without your cooperation. They left him their cards, got back in the SUV, and drove away. Adrian stood in the yard for a long time, watching the dust settle on the gravel road, before he went inside to explain to his son why men in suits had come to their door. That night, after Jamie was asleep, Adrian sat at the kitchen table with the folder open in front of him. 12 years of sketches, plans, dreams built on paper and stolen in reality. He'd thought he'd made peace with it, thought he'd buried it deep enough that it couldn't hurt him anymore. He'd been wrong. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Adrian? Elena's voice, tentative, careful. You gave them my work, he said. I gave them the truth. You had no right. I had every right. Victor's using your work to destroy me, to steal everything I built. I'm not letting him win. So you decided I don't get a choice? Silence on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. You're right. I should have asked first. I should have... She paused. I'm sorry. Adrian closed his eyes, pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead. Why are you doing this? Because it's not just about me anymore. The FBI found other victims, other people Victor stole from, other careers he destroyed. If we don't stop him now, he keeps doing it. And you need me to be the one who stops him. I need you to tell the truth, that's all. Just tell the truth about what happened. The truth didn't help me 12 years ago. Because you were alone. You're not alone now. Adrian looked at the sketches spread across the table, looked at the work he'd poured his soul into, only to watch someone else take credit for it. If I do this, he said slowly, if I testify or whatever they need, my name goes public. People will know. Jamie will know. His mother will know. Everyone will know I got destroyed by someone smarter and more powerful than me. No, Elena said firmly. Everyone will know you built something beautiful and someone tried to steal it, and that you finally fought back. What if we lose? Then we lose together. Adrian sat there in the dark kitchen, holding a phone against his ear and a future he'd never wanted in his hands. 48 hours, he said. That's what they gave me. What are you going to do? He looked at the folder one more time, at the life he'd lost and the life he'd built in its place. I don't know yet, he said. But that was a lie. He already knew. He'd always known. Some truths, no matter how deep you bury them, eventually claw their way back to the surface. Adrian spent the next morning pretending everything was normal. He made Jamie breakfast, scrambled eggs, slightly burned at the edges the way his son somehow preferred them. He packed a lunch. He drove him to school and watched him run toward the playground, backpack bouncing, completely unaware that his father's carefully constructed world was about to crack wide open. Then Adrian drove to the lake and sat in his truck for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. The 48 hours were ticking down. 24 already gone. By tomorrow night, he'd have to give the FBI an answer that would either bury the past for good or drag it screaming back into the light. His phone rang. He almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed a number he recognized, Jamie's school. Mr. Cross? This is Principal Hoffman. Adrian's chest tightened. Is Jamie okay? He's fine physically, but we had an incident this morning. Another student said something that upset him, and Jamie, well, he pushed the boy. We have a strict policy about physical contact. Adrian closed his eyes. I'll be right there. He found Jamie sitting outside the principal's office, arms crossed, face red and blotchy from crying. The other kid, Marcus something, a fourth grader who'd always been too big for his age and too mean for anyone's good, was sitting on the opposite side of the hallway with his mother, who kept shooting dirty looks in Jamie's direction. Adrian knelt in front of his son. Hey, talk to me. Jamie's lower lip trembled. He said you were a loser. What? Marcus said his dad told him. Said you used to be somebody, but now you just fix broken stuff because nobody wants you to do real work anymore. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Adrian felt his jaw clench, felt the anger rising hot and fast, but he kept his voice calm. Did you push him because he said that? Jamie nodded miserably. I told him to shut up. He didn't, so I pushed him. Jamie, I'm sorry, Dad. I know I shouldn't have, but he kept saying it and the tears came harder now. It's not true, right? You're not a loser. Adrian pulled his son into his arms, felt the small body shake against him. Over Jamie's shoulder, he saw Marcus's mother whispering something to Principal Hoffman, pointing at them like they were the problem. Listen to me, Adrian said quietly, pulling back so Jamie could see his face. What Marcus said, it doesn't matter. People are going to say things sometimes, mean things, things they don't understand, and you can't push every person who says something you don't like. But it's not fair. No, it's not. So what do I do? Adrian wished he had a better answer. Wished he could tell his son that truth and fairness always won in the end, but he'd lived long enough to know better. You hold your head up, he said, and you don't let them make you small. Jamie wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Is that what you do? The question cut deeper than the kid knew. I'm trying to, Adrian said. Principal Hoffman called them into her office. There was a lecture about school policy, about appropriate behavior, about setting examples. Adrian listened with half his attention while the other half churned through the realization that this, Marcus's taunts, the whispers, the judgment, was just the beginning. If he went public with what Victor had done, if he testified, every detail of his failure would become common knowledge. Jamie wouldn't just hear about his father being a loser from some bully on the playground. He'd read about it online, see it in news articles, watch it become the defining fact of Adrian Cross's existence. But if he stayed silent, if he let Victor win again, what would that teach Jamie about standing up when things got hard? There was no good choice, just two different kinds of damage. They left the school with a warning. One more incident and Jamie would face suspension. In the parking lot, Adrian watched his son climb into the truck, small and quiet and trying so hard not to cry again. Ice cream? Adrian offered. Jamie shook his head. Can we just go home? Yeah, buddy, we can go home. But when Adrian turned the key in the ignition, his phone buzzed with a text from Elena. We need to talk. In person. Please. He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Not today. Her response came immediately. Victor knows. About the FBI. About you. He's moving up his timeline. If we don't act now, we lose everything. Adrian dropped the phone on the passenger seat and drove home in silence, feeling the trap close tighter with every mile. Later that night, after Jamie had finally fallen asleep, curled up with the stuffed bear his mother had given him 3 years ago, before she'd decided Adrian's failures were more than she could handle. Adrian sat on the back porch and opened the folder again. He'd looked at these sketches so many times they'd lost meaning, just lines on paper, ghosts of ambition. But tonight, he tried to see them the way he had 12 years ago, when he'd believed talent and hard work were enough, when he'd trusted that people like Victor Hale rewarded merit instead of exploiting it. He'd been so damn naive. Headlights swept across the front yard. Adrian didn't need to look to know whose car it was. Elena found him on the porch, still holding the sketches. She didn't ask permission to sit, just took the chair beside him and waited. He called me, she said finally. Victor, first time since the divorce was finalized. What did he want? To remind me what happens to people who try to fight him. He didn't threaten directly. He's too smart for that. Just mentioned some mutual acquaintances who'd experienced unfortunate setbacks after crossing him. Lost contracts, failed projects, careers that mysteriously stalled. Adrian set the sketches down. Sounds about right. He knows you're involved, knows the FBI has your original designs. He said. She paused, and Adrian saw her hands tighten on the armrests. He said some lies are too useful to let die. That you already tried to expose him once and nobody believed you. That if I keep pushing this, all I'll do is destroy what's left of both our reputations. He's probably right. Elena turned to look at him. In the porch light, her face was shadowed, hard to read. Is that what you think? I think Victor Hale has spent 12 years making sure his version of events is the only one that matters. I think he has lawyers and money and connections that make him bulletproof. And I think people like us, people who've already lost to him once, don't get second chances. So what? We just give up? I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared out at the dark woods beyond the yard. I'm saying I need to know what this costs. Really costs. Not the legal fees or the publicity or the time. I need to know what it does to Jamie when his classmates find out his dad got crushed by someone smarter. What it does when his mother uses it as ammunition to take him away permanently. What it does when I have to look him in the eye and explain why I dragged us both through hell for something that might not even work. Elena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it before. My father built a company from nothing, she said. Small construction firm, Worked himself half to death, pouring foundations and framing houses until he saved enough to hire a crew. By the time I was 10, he was bidding on commercial projects. By the time I was 15, he was building hotels. Adrian waited. He died when I was 19, heart attack on a job site. The company went to my uncle, my father's brother. I was too young, too inexperienced, nobody took me seriously. My uncle ran it into the ground in 5 years, sold it for parts when the debts got too high. She looked at Adrian. I spent the next 10 years building something new, something that couldn't be taken from me. And when Victor came along, when he seemed like a partner who understood what I was trying to do, I thought I'd finally found someone I could trust. But you hadn't. No. I'd found someone who saw opportunity, who saw a woman with resources and ambition, and no one watching her back closely enough. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The divorce was brutal. He tried to take everything. And he would have, except I'd learned from my uncle. I'd built walls around what mattered, legal protections, firewalls. But this lawsuit, this claim about Meridian Tower, it goes around all of that. Because if he can prove he contributed materially to the company's success, if he can show that his work was foundational to our growth, then all my protections don't matter. And if I testify that the work was mine, that he stole it, then his entire case falls apart. No contribution, no partnership claim, nothing. Adrian picked up one of the sketches, the main elevation drawing, the one that had won awards with Victor's name on it. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't losing the credit. It wasn't even losing my career. It was knowing that somewhere out there, that building exists. People walk past it every day. They look up at it and think it's beautiful or impressive or whatever. And they think Victor Hale made that. They think his vision, his talent, his work is what they're seeing. He set the sketch down. I can live with losing, but I can't stand that he gets to keep the lie. Elena reached over and took the drawing, studied it in the dim light. This is really good. It was a long time ago. Talent doesn't expire. She looked at him. The FBI agent I spoke with, Agent Morrison, he said they've been building a case against Victor for months. Tax fraud mostly, inflated project costs, hidden assets, offshore accounts. But it's all technical, financial. Hard to make a jury care about. What you have, what he did to you, that's a story people understand. Theft. Betrayal. A young architect getting his future stolen by someone he trusted. So I'm the emotional appeal. You're the proof that Victor's pattern didn't start with me, that he's been doing this for years. And if we can show that, if we can make people see who he really is, then maybe we win, or maybe we just look like desperate people trying to tear down someone more successful. Adrian stood, gathered the sketches into a pile. I need to think. How much time do you need? Don't know, but I've got until tomorrow night to decide if I'm willing to bet everything I've built here on the chance that the truth actually matters. Elena stood too, but she didn't move toward her car. Can I ask you something? Sure. That morning on the dock, when I first showed up, you said some people don't need questions, they need space. Did you mean that, or were you just trying to get rid of me? Adrian almost smiled. Little of both, maybe. Well, for what it's worth, the space helped. Coming here, sitting by the water, watching you work. It was the first time in months I didn't feel like I was drowning. She paused. So, thank you for that. You don't need to thank me for ignoring you. I'm not thanking you for ignoring me, I'm thanking you for seeing what I needed before I did. She left then, before he could figure out what to say to that. Adrian stood on the porch until her taillights disappeared down the road, then went inside and checked on Jamie one more time. His son was still asleep, still clutching that bear, still completely innocent of the decision his father was trying to make. In the kitchen, Adrian made coffee he didn't drink and stared at his phone. The FBI agent's card was sitting on the counter where he'd left it. All he had to do was call. Say yes. Let the machinery of justice grind forward and hope it crushed the right person in the end. Instead, he opened his laptop, the old beaten thing he used for billing and supply orders, and typed Victor Hale's name into the search bar. The results were exactly what he expected. Company website showcasing prestigious projects, articles about innovative design, photos of Victor at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians and celebrities, looking every inch the successful architect who'd earned his place in the world. And there, buried 6 pages deep in the search results, was a mention of Meridian Tower, the building that had launched Victor's career. the one that had destroyed Adrian's. He clicked through to the Architectural Journal article, read the glowing description of Victor's vision and execution. There was a quote from Victor himself. "This project represents everything I believe architecture should be: functional beauty, human-centered design, innovation grounded in timeless principles." Adrian's own words. From a presentation he'd given to the firm's partners 12 years ago. Repackaged and sold under Victor's name, like everything else. He closed the laptop before he put his fist through the screen. His phone rang. Not Elena this time. A number with a Chicago area code. Adrian answered. "Yeah?" "Mr. Cross, this is Agent Morrison, FBI. We met the other day." "I remember. I wanted to touch base before your deadline. See if you had any questions about the process, what testifying would involve, that kind of thing." "I've got a question." "Shoot, what happens if we lose? If I testify and Victor's lawyers tear me apart and the jury decides I'm just a washed-up architect trying to blame someone else for my failures?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Then you go home knowing you told the truth, and we keep building the case with what we have." "That's not much of a safety net." "No, it's not. But here's the thing, Mr. Cross. Victor Hale has been getting away with this kind of thing for a long time. He's good at it. He knows how to insulate himself, how to make his victims look unreliable or vindictive. But every once in a while, someone stands up anyway. Someone decides that telling the truth is worth the risk. And when that happens, other people start paying attention. Other victims come forward. The case gets stronger. So I'm supposed to be the first domino. You're supposed to be the guy who stops letting Victor Hale win by default." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "What about my son? What happens to him when this goes public?" "I can't answer that, but I can tell you that kids are tougher than we give them credit for, and they pay more attention than we think. Your son's going to remember whether his father stood up or stayed quiet. Both choices teach him something. You just have to decide which lesson you want to pass on." After Morrison hung up, Adrian sat in the dark kitchen and thought about lessons, about the things his own father had taught him, mostly about work, about showing up, about keeping your word even when it cost you. His father had been a carpenter, had built houses for 40 years without ever making much money or getting much recognition, but he'd been proud of his work. Had always said that what you built with your hands mattered more than what people said about you. Adrian had believed that once, had built his entire career on the idea that good work spoke for itself. And then Victor had taught him a different lesson, that good work only spoke as loud as the person claiming credit for it, that talent without protection was just opportunity for someone smarter and more ruthless. So which lesson did he want to pass on to Jamie? His father's, that integrity and hard work were their own reward? Or Victor's, that the world belonged to whoever was willing to take it? He was still sitting there, trying to figure out the answer, when headlights swept across the front windows again. Different car this time. Expensive but understated. A silver Mercedes that pulled into the driveway and sat there idling for a long moment before the engine cut off. Adrian already knew who it was before the man stepped out. Victor Hale looked exactly the same. Older, sure, grayer at the temples, a few more lines around the eyes, but still carrying himself with that easy confidence of someone who'd never had a door closed in his face. Tailored suit, Italian shoes, the kind of casual wealth that made everyone around him feel slightly shabby. Adrian met him at the door, didn't invite him in. "Hello, Adrian," Victor said. Warm, friendly, like they were old colleagues catching up instead of enemies circling each other. "You need to leave. Just wanted to talk. 5 minutes, then I'll go." "There's nothing to talk about." "I think there is." Victor glanced past Adrian into the house. "Nice place, quiet. Good for raising a kid, I imagine. How old is your son now? 6, 7? Adrian stepped outside, pulled the door closed behind him, put himself between Victor and his house. "You don't get to talk about my son." Victor raised his hands. "Fair enough. I didn't come here to make threats, Adrian. I came to make you an offer." "Not interested. You haven't heard it yet." "Don't need to." But Victor kept talking anyway because people like him always did. "The FBI is wasting everyone's time. They've got nothing on me that'll stick. Bad accounting, maybe. Some aggressive tax strategies. My lawyers will handle it. But this thing with you, this story about Meridian Tower, it's messy. It makes people ask questions I'd rather not answer. So here's what I'm proposing. You walk away. Tell the FBI you were mistaken, that your memory of events isn't as clear as you thought. In exchange, I'll make sure Elena's lawsuit goes away. No settlement, no admission of wrongdoing. She keeps her company. I move on with my life. Everyone wins, except me. You get peace. You get to keep living this quiet life you've built without dragging your name through the mud. Your son gets to grow up without reading about how his father was a failed architect who couldn't handle the pressure. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. That seems like a win to me. And if I say no, then we go to court. And my lawyers, who are very, very good, will make you look like an obsessed, delusional man who's been nursing a grudge for 12 years. They'll bring up your breakdown, your divorce, your complete failure to maintain any kind of career after leaving my firm. They'll paint you as someone who's trying to blame me for his own inadequacies. Victor's voice stayed pleasant, conversational. And when it's over, when you've been humiliated in front of everyone, Elena will still lose her company, you'll still have nothing, and I'll still have Meridian Tower. Adrian's hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pocket so Victor wouldn't see. Why? He asked. Why come here? Why make this offer if you're so sure you'll win? For the first time, something flickered across Victor's face. Not quite uncertainty, but close enough. Because I'd rather not fight if I don't have to, he said. Because litigation is expensive and time-consuming, and there's always a chance something unexpected happens. Because I'm offering you a way out that doesn't destroy everyone involved. How generous. I'm serious, Adrian. Take the deal. Walk away. Protect your son from this mess. The way you protected me? Victor's expression hardened. I gave you an opportunity. You weren't ready for it. That's not my fault. You stole my work. I refined your ideas, made them practical, brought them to market. That's what senior partners do. They take raw talent and turn it into something the world can actually use. You should have been grateful. I should have been credited. You were credited as a junior designer, which is what you were. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a second Adrian almost doubted his own memory. That was Victor's real gift. Not architecture, but the ability to reshape reality until his version was the only one that made sense. Leave, Adrian said. Now. Victor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll take that as a no to my offer. Smart man. Not smart enough, apparently. Victor started toward his car, then paused. You know what your problem always was, Adrian. You thought being talented was enough. You never understood that success isn't about who does the best work. It's about who tells the best story. And I've always been better at that than you. He drove away, leaving Adrian standing in the yard with his hands still shaking and his mind racing. Inside, Jamie called out from his bedroom, Dad? Who was that? Adrian went upstairs, found his son sitting up in bed, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Nobody important, Adrian said. Go back to sleep. Are you okay? You look weird. I'm fine, buddy. Jamie frowned. You're lying. You do that thing with your jaw when you're lying. 6 years old and already too perceptive. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. Okay, I'm not fine, but I will be. I just need to figure some things out. Is it about that man, the one who said you were a loser? Sort of. It's complicated. Jamie thought about this. Is he right? Are you a loser? The question hurt more than it should have. What do you think? I think you're my dad, and you fix things, and you help people, and you make really good pancakes even though you burn them sometimes. Jamie shrugged. So, no, I don't think you're a loser. Adrian pulled his son into a hug, held on maybe longer than necessary. Thanks, bud. Are you going to fight him, the man? I'm thinking about it. You should, because if he's being mean and saying things that aren't true, somebody should stop him. If only it were that simple. But Jamie's certainty, his absolute faith that right and wrong were clear and fighting for the truth was always worth it. Maybe that was the lesson Adrian needed to remember. After Jamie fell back asleep, Adrian went downstairs and called Agent Morrison. It's Adrian Cross, he said when the agent answered. I've made a decision. Morrison arrived at Adrian's house the next morning with another agent and a briefcase full of documents that needed signing. Legal waivers, witness protection protocols, statements that would become part of the official record. Adrian sat at his kitchen table and signed them all while Jamie ate cereal and watched cartoons in the next room, completely unaware that his father had just agreed to blow up what was left of their quiet life. "We'll need you in Chicago by the end of the week," Morrison said, sliding the papers back into his briefcase. "Deposition first, then we prep you for court." "How long?" "Hard to say. Victor's lawyers will try to drag this out. Could be months." Adrian glanced toward the living room where Jamie was laughing at something on TV. "I can't leave my son for months." "Bring him. We'll set you up in corporate housing. Good schools nearby. It'll be temporary." Nothing about this felt temporary. It felt like stepping off a cliff and hoping someone had bothered to put water at the bottom. After the agents left, Adrian called Elena. She answered on the first ring. "I'm in," he said. There was a long pause. Then, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to win." "We will." "You don't know that." "No. But I believe it anyway." Her voice softened. "When do you leave?" "End of the week. They want me in Chicago for prep." "I'll be there too. For the deposition. We can—" She stopped herself. "We'll figure it out." After they hung up, Adrian spent the rest of the day trying to explain to Jamie why they were moving to Chicago for a while, why Dad had to go to court, why some things from a long time ago were becoming important again. Jamie took it better than expected. Kids were adaptable that way. As long as he had his dad and his stuffed bear and the promise that this wasn't forever, he'd be okay. That night, Adrian called his ex-wife. Sarah answered with suspicion already in her voice. "Adrian, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I wanted to let you know I'm taking Jamie to Chicago for a few weeks. Maybe longer." "Chicago? Why?" He'd known this question was coming, had practiced the answer a dozen different ways. But sitting there with the phone pressed to his ear, all the practiced words fell apart. "There's a legal situation. Something from before. I have to testify." "Testify about what?" "The firm I used to work for. The project that... Look, it's complicated, but I need to be there, and Jamie's coming with me." Sarah's silence was worse than yelling. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "Is this about Victor Hale?" Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. "How do you know that name?" Because you spent 2 years obsessing over him after you left the firm. 2 years convinced he'd stolen from you while our marriage fell apart and the bills piled up, and I begged you to just let it go and move on." The anger was clear now, sharp and familiar. "I thought you were done with this." "I was, but it's not done with me." "That's not good enough, Adrian. You don't get to drag our son into your vendetta." "It's not a vendetta. It's the truth." "The truth?" "The truth is that you couldn't handle the pressure of a high-level firm, and you blamed Victor instead of taking responsibility. The truth is that you chose this crusade over your family once already, and now you're doing it again." The words landed like punches, not because they were true, Adrian had spent 12 years proving they weren't, but because Sarah believed them, had always believed them. And if she believed them, how many other people would too? "I signed contracts," Adrian said quietly. "The FBI has the original documents. I can prove what happened." "You tried to prove it before. Nobody listened. They're listening now. Until Victor's lawyers make you look crazy again. Until Jamie has to watch his father get destroyed in court. Until this whole thing blows up and you come crawling back here with nothing to show for it except more damage." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I won't let you do that to him." "He's my son too." "Then act like it. Stay home. Keep him out of this mess. Be the father he needs instead of the hero you want to be." Adrian closed his eyes. "I'm not trying to be a hero." "Then what are you trying to be?" "Someone who doesn't teach his son that liars win by default." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, the anger had shifted into something sadder. "You're going to lose, Adrian. Victor's too powerful, too connected. And when you do, when this all falls apart, Jamie's going to be the one who pays for it. I hope you're ready for that." She hung up before he could respond. Adrian sat in the dark kitchen, phone still in his hand, and wondered if she was right. If he was making a terrible mistake. If protecting Jamie meant walking away instead of fighting. But then he remembered what his son had said. That somebody should stop Victor if he was being mean and saying things that weren't true. That simple, 6-year-old certainty that right mattered. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe he would lose. But at least Jamie would know his father had tried. The next 3 days were a blur of packing and arrangements and phone calls with lawyers who used words like discovery and cross-examination like they were normal things everyone understood. Elena called twice, once to ask if he needed anything, once just to make sure he hadn't changed his mind. He hadn't, but that didn't mean he was sure. On Thursday night, the night before they were supposed to leave, someone threw a brick through Adrian's workshop window. The crash brought him running from the house. Glass everywhere. The brick sitting in the middle of the floor with a note wrapped around it. "Drop it," the note said. Last warning. Adrian stood there holding the brick, feeling his pulse hammer in his ears. Through the broken window, he could see the road, empty, dark, whoever had done this long gone. He looked at the note again, at the block letters that could have been written by anyone. But he knew who'd sent it. Inside the house, Jamie was calling for him, scared by the noise. Adrian shoved the brick and note into a drawer, locked it, and went to calm his son down. Told him a bird had flown into the window. Nothing to worry about. Go back to bed. Then he called Morrison. "We've got a problem," Adrian said, and explained about the brick. Morrison swore quietly. "You report it to local police?" "Not yet." "Do it. Get it on record. And start packing tonight instead of tomorrow. I'm sending someone to escort you to Chicago." "You think that's necessary?" "I think Victor's getting nervous. Nervous people do stupid things. I'd rather you and your son were somewhere safe." They left before sunrise, which meant Adrian didn't get to say goodbye to the dock, or the lake, or any of the quiet places that had kept him sane for the last 12 years. He just loaded Jamie and their bags into the truck and followed the FBI escort sedan out of town while his son slept in the passenger seat and the workshop window stayed broken behind them. Chicago hit like a wall of noise and concrete and too many people moving too fast. Adrian had forgotten what cities felt like. The constant hum of traffic, the smell of exhaust and hot asphalt, the way everyone looked at you without really seeing you. He'd gotten used to open spaces and silence. This felt like drowning. The corporate housing Morrison had arranged turned out to be a furnished apartment in a high-rise downtown. 23rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Expensive furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. The kind of place people like Victor lived in without thinking about it. Jamie loved it immediately, ran from room to room, pressed his face against the windows, asked if they could stay here forever. Adrian unpacked their bags and tried not to think about how temporary this was, how easily it could all disappear. Elena met them for dinner that night at a quiet restaurant near the apartment. She'd offered to cook, but Adrian had declined. Taking her help with housing was one thing, but letting her play house felt like crossing a line he wasn't ready for. She showed up in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer armor, looking almost normal. Jamie was shy at first, but she won him over by asking about his favorite video games and actually listening to the answers. By the time their food arrived, Jamie was explaining the entire plot of some game Adrian had never heard of, while Elena nodded seriously like it mattered. "He likes you," Adrian said later, after Jamie had gone to the bathroom. "He's a good kid." "He is. Smart, too. Picks up on things." Elena glanced toward the bathroom. "Does he know what's happening, why you're here?" "Some of it. Not all." Adrian pushed pasta around his plate. "His mother thinks I'm making a mistake, dragging him into something that's going to blow up in our faces. What do you think?" "I think she might be right, but I also think some mistakes are worth making." Elena reached across the table, put her hand over his. It was the first time they'd touched beyond handshakes and accidental brushes. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. "We're going to win this," she said. Adrian wanted to believe her, wanted to feel the certainty she carried like armor, but all he felt was tired. "Tell me something," he said. "If we lose, if Victor walks away with everything and we end up with nothing, what happens to you?" "I start over, again." "Just like that?" "Just like that. I've done it before. I can do it again." She squeezed his hand. "But we're not going to lose." "You keep saying that because I need you to believe it." Jamie came back before Adrian could respond, and they finished dinner talking about normal things. School, movies, the view from the apartment. Small talk that felt like a life they might have lived if circumstances were different. If Victor hadn't stolen Adrian's work, if Elena hadn't married the wrong man, if the world worked the way it was supposed to instead of the way it actually did. The deposition was scheduled for Monday morning. Adrian spent the weekend with Elena's lawyers, 3 sharp, expensive people who talked fast and asked questions faster. They walked him through what to expect, how Victor's lawyers would try to rattle him, how to answer without giving them ammunition, how to stay calm when they accused him of lying. "They're going to go after your credibility," the lead attorney said. Her name was Catherine Chen, and she had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without meaning to. Your breakdown after leaving the firm, your divorce, your failure to find work in the industry. They'll paint you as unstable, vindictive, someone with an axe to grind. What do I say to that? The truth, that you tried to expose fraud and got blacklisted for it. That you lost everything because you refused to stay quiet. That you're here now because you're tired of letting Victor Hale profit from theft. Catherine leaned forward. "But here's the thing, Mr. Cross. You can't get angry. You can't raise your voice or get defensive or show them they're getting to you. Victor's lawyers will be looking for any crack they can exploit. You need to be calm, credible, unshakable." "I'll try." "Don't try. Do it. Because if you fall apart in that room, we lose everything." On Sunday night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He stood at the apartment window watching the city lights blur together and thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the questions he couldn't answer, all the damage he might be doing to Jamie by being here at all. His phone buzzed. "Elena. Can't sleep either. Want company?" He should have said no, should have kept the boundaries clear, but he texted back anyway. Apartment 2307. She arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. They sat on the balcony, 23 floors up, the river a dark ribbon below, and didn't talk about the deposition or Victor or any of it, just drank wine and listened to the city breathe. "Tell me something real," Elena said after a while. "Something that has nothing to do with any of this." Adrian thought about it. "I wanted to be a carpenter, like my dad. Before architecture, before college, I wanted to build houses with my hands and go home smelling like sawdust." "Why didn't you?" "Guidance counselor told my parents I was too smart for trade work, that I should go to college, do something more with my potential. So I did. Got a scholarship, studied architecture because it was the closest thing to carpentry that made everyone happy." He finished his wine. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just ignored them, built houses. Never met Victor. You wouldn't have designed Meridian Tower." "No, but I also wouldn't have lost 12 years of my life." Elena refilled their glasses. "You want to know something? When I first took over my father's company, or tried to before my uncle screwed me over, I had no idea what I was doing. I was 19, angry, desperate to prove I belonged. I made terrible decisions, trusted the wrong people, nearly bankrupted myself trying to compete with men who'd been in the industry for decades." She stared at her wine. "My father used to say that success was just failure you survived long enough to learn from. I didn't understand that until I'd failed enough times to make it true." "Be mad. You think that's what this is? Failure we're learning from?" "I think it's us refusing to let failure be the end of the story." They sat in silence after that, watching the city lights and drinking wine and not talking about tomorrow. At some point, Elena fell asleep in her chair, head tilted back, face soft in the glow from the apartment. Adrian covered her with a blanket and went inside to check on Jamie, who was also asleep, sprawled across his bed with his stuffed bear tucked under one arm. Adrian stood in the doorway looking at his son and thought about Sarah's warning, that Jamie would be the one who paid when this all fell apart, that Adrian was choosing this fight over his family. But what was the alternative? Teach Jamie that some lies were too big to fight? That powerful people got to rewrite history and everyone else just had to accept it? No. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever came next, at least Jamie would know his father had stood up. Monday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Adrian put on the suit Elena's lawyers had bought for him, the good kind, the kind that actually fit, and tried not to feel like an imposter. Jamie stayed with the sitter Morrison had vetted. Elena met Adrian in the lobby wearing her armor again, sharp suit, perfect hair, the billionaire mask firmly back in place. "Ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." The deposition took place in a conference room that was all glass and steel and intimidation. Victor's lawyers, 4 of them, all wearing suits that cost more than Adrian's truck, sat on one side of a long table. Adrian sat on the other with Catherine Chen beside him and Elena in the gallery behind them. Victor himself wasn't there. Didn't need to be. His lawyers could handle the work of tearing Adrian apart. The lead attorney was a man named Caldwell. Silver hair, expensive watch, smile like a knife. He started with the basics: name, age, employment history, before moving in for the kill. Mr. Cross, you worked at Hale & Associates for approximately 7 months in 2014, is that correct? Yes. And during that time, you were involved in the design of a project called Meridian Tower. I designed Meridian Tower. Caldwell's smile widened. You claim you designed it, but according to the firm's records, you were a junior designer working under Mr. Hale's supervision. Is that accurate? I was hired as a junior designer, but the work was mine. Yet you signed contracts stating that all work product created during your employment belonged to the firm. I did, and those contracts gave the firm, specifically Mr. Hale as senior partner, the right to claim authorship of projects developed under his supervision. Adrian felt Catherine's hand on his arm. A warning. Stay calm. The contracts were fraudulent, Adrian said evenly. Victor manipulated me into signing away rights I didn't understand I was giving up. Fraudulent. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Cross. Do you have any proof of this fraud? I have the original designs, dated before I joined the firm. Sketches, blueprints, concept drawings, all in my hand, all predating any contract. Caldwell flipped through papers in front of him. These designs you claim are originals. Were they ever submitted as evidence in your previous attempt to challenge Mr. Hale's authorship? Here it was. The trap. They were, Adrian said. And what was the outcome of that challenge? It was dismissed. On what grounds? Adrian's jaw tightened. The judge ruled that the evidence was inconclusive, that my signatures on the contracts were valid and binding. So a court of law already determined that you have no claim to Meridian Tower. Is that correct? The court ruled on a technicality, not on the truth. The truth, Mr. Cross, is what courts determine based on evidence. And the evidence, including your own signed contracts, supports Mr. Hale's authorship. Caldwell leaned back, casual, confident. Tell me, after you left Hale & Associates, how many architectural projects did you complete? None. None. In 12 years, you haven't designed a single building. I was blacklisted. Or perhaps you simply weren't as talented as you believed. Perhaps working under Mr. Hale's guidance allowed you to produce work above your actual skill level, and when you left that guidance, you couldn't sustain it. Catherine stood. That's speculation, not questioning. Caldwell waved her off. I'll rephrase. Mr. Cross, isn't it true that your inability to find work after leaving the firm had more to do with your professional reputation than any alleged blacklisting? No, you had a documented breakdown, emotional instability. Your marriage ended. You left the city, abandoned your career. These aren't the actions of someone wrongly accused, Mr. Cross. They're the actions of someone who couldn't handle professional rejection. Adrian felt the anger rising, hot and familiar. Felt the urge to defend himself, to shout, to make them understand. But Catherine's hand was still on his arm, and her voice was in his head. Stay calm. Don't give them the crack. I left, Adrian said quietly, because fighting a man with unlimited resources and no conscience was destroying my life. I chose my son over revenge. That's not weakness. That's survival. And yet here you are, 12 years later, fighting the same battle, seeking revenge against the man who, according to legal record, did nothing wrong. Caldwell smiled. Doesn't that suggest obsession rather than justice? It suggests, Adrian said, meeting his eyes, that some truths don't go away just because they're inconvenient. The deposition lasted 4 more hours. Caldwell went after everything. Adrian's employment history, his finances, his relationship with Elena, his mental state. He tried to paint Adrian as unstable, vindictive, someone who'd latched onto Elena's lawsuit as a way to resurrect his failed accusations. Adrian held firm, answered every question without breaking, without giving them the crack they were looking for. When it was finally over, when the court reporter had packed up and Victor's lawyers had left looking less confident than when they'd arrived, Catherine turned to Adrian. You did good, she said. Didn't feel good. It never does. But you stayed calm, stayed credible. That's what matters. Elena drove Adrian back to the apartment. They didn't talk about the deposition, didn't analyze what had happened or what came next. Just drove through the city in silence until she pulled up in front of his building. Thank you, she said. For what? For not breaking, for not giving them what they wanted. She looked at him. Caldwell's good, one of the best. If he couldn't crack you, Victor's in trouble. Adrian wanted to believe that, wanted to feel like he'd won something today, but all he felt was exhausted. What happens now? He asked. Now we wait. The lawyers review the deposition, look for weaknesses in Victor's case, build our strategy for trial. How long? Couple weeks, maybe a month. She paused. You can go home if you want. Come back when we need you. Adrian thought about the apartment, the broken workshop window, the quiet life waiting for him at the lake. Thought about Jamie asking when they could go home. I'll stay, he said, at least for now. That night after Jamie was asleep, Adrian opened his laptop and searched for Meridian Tower, found recent photos of the building lit up against the Chicago skyline, found articles about its architectural significance, its innovative design, its place in the city's landscape, found Victor's name attached to all of it. He stared at the screen until his eyes burned, then closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Somewhere in this city, Victor was probably sleeping soundly, confident in his lawyers, his power, his ability to bury the truth one more time. But somewhere else, in a conference room, in Elena's legal team's office, people were building a case, connecting dots, finding cracks in Victor's perfect lie. Adrian didn't know if it would be enough, didn't know if truth actually mattered in a system built on contracts and technicalities and who could afford the better lawyers. But he knew he'd made his choice, and whatever came next, he'd see it through. For Jamie, for Elena, for the 27-year-old kid who'd believed talent and hard work were enough. For everyone Victor had crushed on his way to the top. The fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. 2 weeks crawled by like months. Adrian fell into a routine that felt nothing like the life he'd built at the lake. Mornings with Jamie, breakfast, getting him ready for the temporary school Elena's lawyers had arranged. Days spent in conference rooms with Catherine and her team, going over testimony, reviewing documents, preparing for questions he hoped he'd never have to answer. Evenings alone in the apartment while Jamie did homework and asked when they could go home. Adrian never had a good answer for that. On a Thursday afternoon, Catherine called him into her office. She had that look, the one lawyers got when they'd found something that changed the game. We got the records, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Adrian opened it. Bank statements, wire transfers, dates and amounts that meant nothing to him without context. What am I looking at? Victor's financial history from 2014, the year you worked at his firm. Catherine pointed to a highlighted entry. 3 days after Meridian Tower broke ground, Victor transferred $200,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Then, over the next 6 months, he made regular deposits to that same account. All told, he moved nearly $1 million out of the country during the project. So he was hiding money. That proves what? By itself? Tax evasion, maybe. But look at this. She pulled out another document. We subpoenaed the firm's accounting records. Found payments to a company called Prestige Documentation Services. 5 payments, each for $10,000, all made during your employment. Adrian frowned. What's Prestige Documentation Services? Officially, a notary and document preparation service. Unofficially, they specialize in backdating contracts and creating paperwork that holds up under casual scrutiny but falls apart under forensic examination. Catherine leaned forward. We think Victor paid them to create the contracts you signed, to make it look like the transfer of authorship was legitimate when it was actually forged. Adrian's heart was hammering now. You can prove that? We're working on it. The FBI seized Prestige's records as part of their investigation. If we can match the documents you signed to their work, if we can show Victor paid them to create fraudulent contracts, then everything falls apart. The authorship claim, the legal precedent from your first case, all of it. When will you know? Forensic document analysis takes time, but we should have preliminary results before trial. Catherine sat back. This is good, Adrian. This is exactly what we needed. Adrian wanted to feel relief, wanted to feel like they were finally getting somewhere, but all he felt was numb. What about the other victims? He asked. You said the FBI found other people Victor stole from. 3 so far. 2 architects, 1 engineer. Similar pattern. Victor brought them in, used their work, pushed them out before they could claim credit. None of them fought back. They just disappeared from the industry. She paused. We're trying to get them to testify. If we can show a pattern of behavior, it strengthens our case significantly. Will they do it? Testify? Catherine's expression darkened. One of them died 5 years ago, car accident. The other two are scared. Victor's lawyers have already contacted them, made it clear what happens to people who cross him. So far, they're refusing to cooperate. Can't say I blame them. Neither can I. But without their testimony, this case rests almost entirely on you, on whether a jury believes your version of events over Victor's. She looked at him seriously. Are you ready for that? Adrian thought about Caldwell, about the deposition, about all the ways Victor's lawyers would try to destroy him in court. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That night, Elena showed up at the apartment with takeout and news of her own. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from too many late nights and too much pressure. But there was something else in her eyes, something that looked almost like hope. Victor's trying to settle, she said, dropping the food on the kitchen counter. Adrian stared at her. What? His lawyers reached out this afternoon, said he's willing to drop the lawsuit against my company in exchange for us dropping the fraud charges and agreeing not to pursue the authorship claim on Meridian Tower. That's a trap, I know. Catherine said the same thing. Elena pulled plates from the cabinet, started unpacking containers. But it means he's worried. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be offering anything. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it, which I will, for exactly 5 seconds, before telling them to go to hell. She looked at Adrian. But I wanted to talk to you first. This is your fight too. If you want to take the settlement, walk away with your life intact, I'll understand. Adrian thought about it, about the easy way out, about going back to the lake, to his workshop, to the quiet life where nobody asked questions and the past stayed buried. No, he said. You sure? Because once we reject this, there's no going back. Victor will come at us with everything he's got. He's been coming at me with everything he's got for 12 years. I'm still here. Elena smiled. Small, genuine, tired. Yeah, you are. They ate dinner with Jamie, who chattered about his new school and the friends he'd made and whether they could get a dog when they went home. Normal conversation. Normal life. The kind of thing Adrian had almost forgotten was possible. After Jamie went to bed, Elena lingered. They ended up on the balcony again, same as that first night, watching the city lights and not talking about the weight they were both carrying. Can I ask you something? Adrian said after a while. Sure. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have settled with Victor months ago, taken whatever deal he offered and moved on. Why keep fighting? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because the first time I tried to build something, I trusted the wrong people and lost everything. When I built it again, I swore I'd never let that happen. I'd protect what was mine, no matter what. She looked at him. But somewhere along the way, protecting what was mine turned into controlling everything, every decision, every risk. I stopped trusting anyone because trust had cost me too much. And then I met you. This guy fixing a dock at dawn, not asking questions, just making space for someone who needed it. You didn't want anything from me, didn't need me to be anyone except whoever I was in that moment. She paused. It reminded me that not everyone's trying to take something, that sometimes people just show up and do the work because it needs doing. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that he'd been doing the same thing she had, protecting himself by keeping everyone at arm's length. That letting her in, letting any of this matter, scared him more than Victor's lawyers ever could. I'm not that guy you think I am, he said finally. The one who just shows up and does the work. I'm scared most of the time. Scared I'm making the wrong choice. Scared I'm going to fail again and take everyone down with me. Good. Good? Yeah, because fearless people are usually idiots. It's the scared ones who know what they're risking that actually get things done. Elena stood, stretched, headed for the door. Get some sleep, Adrian. Trial starts in 2 weeks. The days blurred together after that. More prep sessions, more documents, more lawyers talking in language Adrian only half understood. Catherine's team built their case piece by piece, but Adrian could see the cracks forming. The forensic analysis on the contracts was taking longer than expected. The other victims still refused to testify. And Victor's lawyers kept filing motions, trying to get evidence thrown out, trying to delay the trial, trying to find any angle that would give them an advantage. 1 week before trial, Morrison called. "We got a problem," he said. Adrian closed his eyes. "What kind of problem?" "Prestige Documentation Services. The company Victor allegedly used to forge your contracts. Their owner disappeared 2 days ago. Just vanished. Office cleaned out, records gone, no forwarding address." "Let me guess. Victor got to him." "Can't prove it, but yeah, that's what it looks like. Without the owner's testimony and without the original files, we can't definitively prove the contracts were forged. We've got circumstantial evidence, the payments, the timeline, the pattern, but it's not as solid as we need." Adrian felt the familiar weight settling back over him. The sense that no matter how hard they fought, Victor was always 3 steps ahead. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We go to trial with what we have, your testimony, the original designs, the financial records showing Victor's suspicious activity. It's not perfect, but it might be enough." Morrison paused. "Or you take the settlement, walk away. Victor drops everything, you get your life back." "I already told Elena no." "I'm not asking Elena. I'm asking you, because if this goes south, if we lose, you're the one who'll carry it, not me, not Elena's lawyers. You." Morrison's voice softened slightly. "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of people get chewed up by the system because they thought justice would save them. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it just makes things worse. I need you to go into this with your eyes open." Adrian looked across the apartment at Jamie's closed bedroom door. Thought about his son sleeping in there, trusting that his father knew what he was doing. "My eyes are open," Adrian said, "and I'm still doing this." "All right then, see you in court." The night before trial, Adrian couldn't sleep. He stood at the window watching the city and thinking about all the ways this could end. Victor walking free, reputation intact, while Adrian got torn apart on the stand. Elena losing her company, Jamie watching his father fail in front of everyone. Or maybe, just maybe, something else. Something that looked like justice. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "You still have time to walk away. After tomorrow, you won't." Adrian stared at the message, deleted it, put the phone down, then picked it up again and called Elena. "Can't sleep?" she answered. "No. Me neither." They talked until 3 in the morning, about nothing, about everything, about what they'd do if they won, if they lost, what came after, regardless of the outcome. "I'm glad you showed up that morning," Elena said, finally, "at the dock. I'm glad you didn't ask questions." "I'm glad you came back," Adrian said. When they finally hung up, the sky was starting to lighten, dawn coming whether they were ready or not. The courthouse was all marble and wood and the kind of quiet that felt heavy. Adrian wore the suit Catherine had bought him and tried not to look as terrified as he felt. Jamie stayed with the sitter. No way Adrian was bringing his son to watch this. Elena sat in the gallery behind the plaintiff's table, perfectly composed, giving nothing away. Victor sat on the opposite side with his legal team. This was the first time Adrian had seen him since that night at the house. He looked calm, confident, like he'd already won and was just here to make it official. The jury filed in, 12 people who would decide whether 12 years of lies finally caught up to someone or whether telling the truth just meant getting hurt twice. The prosecution went first. Catherine laid out the case with precision, the timeline, the contracts, the suspicious payments, the pattern of behavior. She painted Victor as a serial thief who built his empire on stolen work, made it clear and simple and damning. Then Caldwell stood for the defense. He was just as precise, just as clear. But his story was different. In his version, Adrian was a talented but unstable junior designer who couldn't handle professional pressure, who'd signed legitimate contracts and then regretted them, who'd spent 12 years nursing a grudge and had latched onto Elena's lawsuit as a way to resurrect failed accusations. Both stories couldn't be true, but both sounded convincing. Adrian took the stand on the second day. Catherine walked him through his testimony, the design process, the contracts, the moment he'd realized what Victor had done. Adrian kept his voice steady, his answers clear, tried to be the credible witness Catherine needed him to be. Then Caldwell stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Cross, you've testified that you designed Meridian Tower entirely on your own. Is that correct?" "Yes." "No input from Mr. Hale? No guidance? No collaboration?" Victor provided feedback. But the design was mine. I see. And yet you were hired as a junior designer. Someone with, 5 years of experience at that point? 5 years, yes. And Mr. Hale had been practicing architecture for nearly 20 years when you joined his firm. Is that correct? Yes. So it seems reasonable that someone with 20 years of experience might have valuable insights to offer someone with only 5. Would you agree? Insights, yes, but he didn't design the building. Caldwell pulled out a document. This is an internal memo from Hale and Associates, dated 3 months into the Meridian Tower project. It's written by you, Mr. Cross. In it, you thank Mr. Hale for his guidance and note that his suggestions significantly improved the structural integrity of the design. Do you remember writing this? Adrian felt his stomach drop. He remembered. It had been a courtesy, the kind of thing junior designers wrote to keep senior partners happy. I remember, he said. So Mr. Hale did contribute to the design. He made suggestions. That's different from what, Mr. Cross? Different from the collaboration you now claim never happened? Caldwell moved closer. Isn't it true that Meridian Tower was exactly what it appeared to be? A collaborative project between a senior architect and a talented junior designer? And isn't it true that you're only claiming sole authorship now because you regret signing contracts that gave proper credit to the firm? No, that's not. You signed those contracts, didn't you? Voluntarily? I was manipulated? Yes or no, Mr. Cross? Did you sign the contracts? Yes, but thank you. No further questions. Catherine tried to repair the damage on redirect. Got Adrian to explain the context of the memo, the pressure he'd been under, the way Victor had used normal professional courtesy to build a false narrative. But Adrian could see the jury's faces, could see the doubt creeping in. The trial dragged on for another week. Elena testified about Victor's pattern of behavior during their marriage, about the suspicious way he'd built his case for the lawsuit, about the offshore accounts and the hidden money. Victor's lawyers countered with character witnesses, colleagues who praised his integrity, clients who swore by his talent, people who made him look like exactly what he claimed to be, a successful architect being unfairly attacked by bitter ex-partners. On the 8th day, Morrison testified about the FBI's investigation, about the payments to Prestige Documentation Services, about the pattern of victims. But without the owner's testimony, without the physical proof that the contracts were forged, it was all circumstantial. Caldwell tore into it on cross, made it sound like a fishing expedition, a federal agency overreaching because they wanted a conviction. And then, on the 9th day, something broke. Catherine got a call during lunch recess. Adrian watched her face change, surprise, then sharp focus, then something that looked like controlled excitement. What? He asked when she hung up. That was Morrison. They found him, the owner of Prestige Documentation Services. He was hiding in Mexico. Local police picked him up this morning on an unrelated warrant. Morrison's flying down to interview him now. Will he talk? Morrison thinks so. Apparently Victor stopped paying him after he disappeared. Guy's broke and pissed off. Catherine grabbed her briefcase. I'm going to ask the judge for a continuance. If we can get his testimony, if he admits to forging those contracts, we win. Maybe. It's not over yet, but it's closer than it was this morning. The judge granted the continuance, 3 days to allow the FBI to conduct their interview and provide testimony if warranted. Victor's lawyers objected strenuously, but the judge overruled them. Adrian spent those 3 days barely breathing, waiting for Morrison to call, waiting to hear whether this one break would be enough. On the 3rd day, Morrison called. He talked, Morrison said. Gave us everything. Dates, methods, the whole process of how Victor commissioned the forged contracts. Even kept copies of the original documents before he altered them. Adrian sat down hard. He kept copies? Insurance policy, apparently. Didn't trust Victor not to throw him under the bus. Smart guy, for a forger. Morrison's voice carried grim satisfaction. He's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity on related charges. We've got him on a plane back to Chicago tonight. Catherine put the owner on the stand the next morning. His name was Dennis Kramer, and he looked exactly like someone who'd been hiding in Mexico for 2 weeks. Unshaven, tired, scared. But his testimony was clear. Victor had approached him in 2014, paid him to create contracts that looked legitimate but contained buried clauses transferring authorship rights, paid him to backdate documents, paid him to create a paper trail that would hold up in court. Kramer walked the jury through the entire process, showed them the original contracts, the real ones, compared to the forged versions Adrian had signed, pointed out the alterations, the backdated signatures, the careful construction of Victor's lie. Caldwell tried to discredit him on cross, pointed out that Kramer was a criminal, that he'd fled justice, that he was testifying to save himself. But the documents spoke for themselves. The evidence was there, black and white, undeniable. When Kramer stepped down, Adrian watched Victor's face. For the first time since the trial started, the confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. The prosecution rested. The defense put on a last-ditch effort, more character witnesses, more attempts to paint Adrian as unstable, but everyone in that courtroom knew it was over. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, their faces were set. The foreman read the verdict. On the charges of fraud and forgery, guilty. On the claim of intellectual property theft, guilty. On the lawsuit against Elena's company, dismissed with prejudice. The courtroom erupted. Elena grabbed Adrian's hand, squeezed so hard it hurt. Catherine was already talking about next steps, about damages, about criminal charges. But Adrian wasn't listening. He was watching Victor, watching the man who'd stolen 12 years of his life finally face consequences. Victor's lawyers were talking frantically, already planning appeals, but Victor himself just sat there, staring straight ahead, his perfect lie finally shattered. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest, something he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. Not quite relief, not quite victory, just the simple, exhausted knowledge that the truth had finally caught up. The judge called for order, addressed Victor directly. "Mr. Hale, in light of the jury's verdict and the severity of the fraud committed, I'm suspending your architectural license pending criminal investigation. All contracts and claims built on the Meridian Tower authorship are hereby voided. Mr. Cross's authorship is officially restored with all associated rights and recognition." Victor stood. For the first time, he looked directly at Adrian. No smile, no confidence, just cold, hard hatred. "This isn't over," he said quietly. The bailiff moved toward him, but the judge cut in. "Mr. Hale, you're done making threats in my courtroom. Sit down or be held in contempt." Victor sat, but his eyes stayed on Adrian. A promise that whatever legal victory had been won today, the personal war was far from finished. Adrian held his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Let him threaten, let him hate. The truth was on record now. The lie was broken. And for the first time in 12 years, Adrian's name belonged to him again. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras, microphones. Questions shouted from every direction. Catherine handled most of it, gave a statement about justice prevailing, about the importance of holding powerful people accountable. Elena stood beside Adrian, her hand still in his. When the reporters turned to her, asked what she'd say to other victims of fraud, she was clear and firm. Fight. Even when it's hard, even when you're scared, fight, because people like Victor Hale only win when we let them. Adrian didn't say anything, just stood there, feeling the weight of the last weeks finally start to lift. They went back to the apartment, ordered pizza, let Jamie ask 100 questions about court and judges, and why everyone looked so happy. Adrian tried to explain in terms a 6-year-old could understand, that sometimes people take things that don't belong to them, and sometimes you have to fight to get them back. "Did you win?" Jamie asked. "Yeah, bud. We won." "Good. Can we go home now?" Adrian looked at Elena. She smiled. "Yeah," Adrian said, we can go home." That night, after Jamie was asleep, Adrian and Elena sat on the balcony one last time. The city spread out below them, lights blurring into constellations. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "I don't know. Go back to the lake. Fix the workshop window. Figure out what normal looks like." "And us?" Adrian looked at her. At this woman who'd stumbled onto his dock months ago, looking for space she didn't know she needed. Who'd given him a reason to fight when he'd almost forgotten how? "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'd like to find out." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "Me too." They sat there until the city started to quiet, until the exhaustion finally caught up, until the fight was truly, finally over. And somewhere in the distance, dawn was already waiting. They left Chicago 3 days after the verdict. Adrian packed their belongings while Jamie ran around the apartment saying goodbye to rooms like they were old friends. The city had been temporary from the start, but leaving it felt different now. Not like running away, but like choosing to go home. Elena helped them load the truck. She'd offered to have movers handle it, but Adrian had declined. Some things you needed to do yourself. You'll call when you get there? She asked, handing him a box of Jamie's toys. I'll call. And you'll think about what I said? About the project. 2 days ago, Elena had pitched him an idea, a new building for her company's headquarters, something that would carry his name, his vision, a chance to step back into architecture after 12 years of silence. Adrian had told her he'd think about it, which was true. He just didn't know what the answer would be yet. I'll think about it, he said now. Jamie appeared at Elena's side, tugging on her coat. Are you coming to visit? If your dad invites me. Jamie looked up at Adrian with wide, expectant eyes. Dad? Adrian smiled despite himself. Yeah, bud, she's invited. Elena's expression softened. She crouched down to Jamie's level. I'll come visit, promise. And maybe you can show me that dock your dad's always working on. It's really cool, and there's fish, and Dad says in the summer we can swim if the water's not too cold, which it always is, but maybe this year will be different. Maybe it will be. They said their goodbyes in the parking garage, awkward and uncertain because neither of them knew exactly what this was yet, just that it mattered, that somewhere between the dock and the courtroom and all the fighting in between, something real had taken root. Elena kissed Adrian's cheek, quick, soft, carrying a promise of more when they figured out what more looked like. Drive safe, she said. Always do. The drive back took 8 hours. Jamie slept through most of it, curled up in the passenger seat with his bear. Adrian drove and thought about everything that had happened. About Victor's face when the verdict came down, about the reporters, about Catherine telling him that the criminal charges would take months to work through, but that the fraud conviction alone would likely mean prison time for Victor. About the fact that winning felt less triumphant than he'd imagined, and more like finally being able to breathe without something crushing his chest. They reached the lake as the sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold that made everything look brand new. Adrian pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a moment, taking it in. The house, the workshop with its still broken window, the trees, the quiet. Home. We're here, Jamie said, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Can I go see my room? Yeah, go ahead. Adrian unloaded the truck slowly, carrying boxes into a house that felt smaller than he remembered, but also more solid, more real. In Chicago, everything had been temporary, borrowed, held together by legal battles and uncertainty. Here, the floors creaked in familiar places. The walls held memories. The kitchen still smelled faintly like the coffee he'd made the morning they'd left. He was putting the last box in Jamie's room when his phone rang. Unknown number. Adrian almost didn't answer, then thought better of it. Mr. Cross? A woman's voice, professional but uncertain. My name is Rachel Torres. I'm an architect in Seattle. I read about your case, about Meridian Tower. Adrian's guard went up immediately. Okay. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you probably don't want to talk about this, but I had to call because... She paused. Victor Hale stole from me too. Adrian sat down on Jamie's bed. What? 6 years ago, I was working at a firm he consulted with. I designed a sustainable housing complex. Innovative construction, minimal environmental impact. It was my thesis project come to life. Her voice was steady, but Adrian could hear the pain underneath. Victor saw the designs, said he wanted to help me present them to the partners. 2 months later, he'd repackaged the whole thing under his name and sold it to a developer in Portland. By the time I figured out what happened, the contracts were signed, and I was out of the firm. Did you fight it? I tried, got a lawyer, filed complaints, but Victor's team buried me in paperwork and legal fees until I couldn't afford to keep going. I was 26, broke. Nobody believed me. She took a breath. I quit architecture after that. Been working in urban planning ever since. Safer, less chance of getting crushed by people like him. Adrian closed his eyes. Another victim, another stolen life. How many were out there? Why are you calling me? He asked. Because you won. Because for the first time in 6 years, I'm seeing proof that fighting back isn't always pointless. And I'm wondering, she hesitated. I'm wondering if it's too late for me to do the same thing, to try again. Adrian thought about that morning on the dock, about Elena showing up lost and desperate and needing space, about how sometimes what people needed wasn't answers, but just knowing they weren't alone. It's not too late, he said. The FBI is still building the case. There might be other victims coming forward. You should call Agent Morrison, tell him what happened. Will he listen? Yeah, he'll listen. And if I do this, if I fight, will it matter, or will I just lose all over again? Adrian looked out Jamie's window at the lake, at the water catching the last light of day. I don't know, maybe you lose. Maybe the system's too broken, and people like Victor are too protected. But maybe you win. Maybe telling the truth is enough to change something. You won't know unless you try. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Call me Adrian, and call Morrison. Let him know I sent you. After she hung up, Adrian sat there thinking about all the Rachel Torreses out there, all the people Victor had crushed on his way up, wondering how many of them were watching the news, reading about the trial, thinking maybe it wasn't too late to stand up. He gave Morrison's number to Rachel in a text, then went downstairs to find Jamie in the kitchen, poking through the fridge like they hadn't been gone for weeks. There's no food, Jamie announced. We'll go to the store tomorrow. Can we get pizza tonight? Yeah, we can get pizza. They ordered from the place in town, ate it on the back porch, while Jamie told Adrian about everything he missed about home. His bike, his friends, the way the lake sounded at night, small things that added up to a life. Dad? Jamie said, picking pepperoni off his slice. Are you happy we're home? Yeah, bud, I'm happy. Are you happy you did the court thing? Adrian considered this. Was he happy? He'd won. Victor was facing consequences. The truth was on record, but happy felt too simple for what he actually felt. I'm glad I did it, he said finally. Even though it was hard, even though it was scary, I'm glad I stood up. Because it was the right thing to do? Yeah, because it was the right thing to do. Jamie nodded seriously, accepting this, then went back to his pizza like the conversation had resolved something important. That night, after Jamie was asleep, Adrian went out to the workshop. The broken window let in cold air and the smell of pine. He stood there looking at the tools, the half-finished furniture, the life he'd built from the scraps of the one Victor had destroyed. For 12 years, this had been enough. The work, the quiet, the careful distance from anything that could hurt him. But standing there now, Adrian realized it wasn't enough anymore. Somewhere between the trial and Rachel Torres's phone call and Jamie's simple question about doing the right thing, something had shifted. He pulled out his phone and called Elena. Hey, she answered. You make it home okay? Yeah, we're here. Adrian looked around the workshop. That project you mentioned, the headquarters building. Tell me more about it. He could hear the smile in her voice. You sure? No, but tell me anyway. Elena talked for 20 minutes about her vision, a building that represented everything her company stood for: innovation, sustainability, human-centered design. She'd already hired a team, but she wanted Adrian to lead it, wanted his name on the plans, wanted to prove that talent didn't disappear just because someone tried to bury it. It's a big project, she said. 2 years, minimum. You'd have to be involved from the start. Site visits, client meetings, the whole thing. It's not fixing docks, Adrian. It's jumping back into the world that chewed you up and spit you out. I know. And you're considering it anyway? Adrian looked at the sketches pinned to his workshop wall. Old designs from a lifetime ago. Dreams he'd tried to forget. I spent 12 years telling myself I was done with architecture, that I'd moved on. Built something better. He paused. But I think I was just hiding, convincing myself that not trying was the same as not failing. And now? Now I'm tired of hiding. Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I'm not going to lie to you. It'll be hard. People will question whether you can still do this, whether you were ever as good as you thought you were. Victor might be in prison, but his shadow's still there. I know. And you want to do it anyway? I want to try, that's all. Just try. Then let's try together. They talked logistics after that, timeline, budget. When Adrian could start, he'd need to hire a small team, set up an office, rebuild a portfolio from scratch. It felt overwhelming and terrifying and exactly right. After they hung up, Adrian didn't go back to the house right away. He stood in the workshop under the stars and thought about his father, about the carpenter who'd built houses for 40 years without recognition or wealth, but with pride in the work itself. His father had taught him that what you built mattered. Victor had taught him that the world didn't care what you built, only who got credit for it. But maybe the real lesson was somewhere in between, that the work mattered and the credit mattered. That you could take pride in what you built while still fighting for the right to claim it. That hiding from the fight didn't make you safe. It just made you smaller. Adrian pulled out his phone one more time and texted Morrison. Got a call from Rachel Torres, another victim. I gave her your number, there might be others. Morrison's reply came fast. Already hearing from 3 more. Your trial opened floodgates. People are ready to talk. Adrian stared at the message. 3 more victims, maybe more after that. Maybe enough to ensure Victor never worked again, never stole again, never crushed anyone else the way he'd crushed Adrian. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Adrian fixed the workshop window, started sketching again, took calls from Elena's team about the project. Jamie went back to his regular school, back to his friends, back to a life that felt normal, except for the occasional reporter showing up wanting interviews. Adrian always declined. He did agree to one interview, a trade magazine that wanted to talk about Meridian Tower, about the restoration of his authorship, about what it meant for architects who'd been stolen from. The journalist was young, earnest, asked good questions. What do you want people to know? She asked near the end. About what happened to you. Adrian thought about it. About Rachel Torres and the 3 other victims and everyone else out there still carrying the weight of someone else's theft. I want them to know that staying silent doesn't make you safe. It just makes the people who hurt you more powerful. He paused. And I want them to know that it's never too late to tell the truth, even if it's been 12 years. Even if you think nobody will listen, someone will. And that might be enough to change everything. The article ran 2 weeks later. Adrian's phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days. More victims. More stories. More people who'd been waiting for someone to prove that fighting back was possible. Morrison coordinated it all, building a case against Victor that went beyond fraud and into a pattern of systematic theft spanning 15 years. The criminal trial was scheduled for 6 months out. Victor's lawyers were still fighting, but the evidence kept piling up. Too much. Too many voices. Too many stolen dreams. Elena visited on a Saturday in early March. She showed up at the house with her car full of blueprints and her face full of barely contained excitement. I know we said we'd wait to start, she said, spreading plans across Adrian's kitchen table. But I couldn't help myself. I've been thinking about the headquarters building non-stop, and I wanted to run something by you. They spent 4 hours going over her ideas. She'd sketched out a basic concept, something that honored traditional architectural principles while pushing into new sustainable technology. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but looking at her sketches, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. The itch to create, to build, to make something that mattered. What do you think? Elena asked. I think we can do better. Better how? Adrian grabbed a pencil, started sketching over her plans, showing her what he saw, how the structure could flow more naturally, how the space could serve people instead of just housing them. The ideas came faster than he could draw them, 12 years of silence breaking open all at once. Elena watched him work, and when he finally stopped, she was smiling. There he is, she said softly. The architect. I'm rusty. You're brilliant and rusty. We'll fix the rusty part. Jamie came home from his friend's house and found them still at the table, surrounded by papers and coffee cups, and the kind of creative chaos Adrian had forgotten he missed. Is Elena staying for dinner? Jamie asked, dropping his backpack by the door. Adrian looked at Elena. She looked back. I could stay, she said. If you're cooking. I'm definitely not cooking, but we could order something. Chinese? Chinese works. They ordered enough food for 6 people and ate it on the back porch while the sun went down, and Jamie told Elena about school and his friends and the fish he'd almost caught last summer. Normal conversation, normal life, the kind of thing Adrian had convinced himself he didn't need because needing meant risking. But watching Elena laugh at one of Jamie's terrible jokes, watching his son light up having her there, Adrian realized he'd been wrong about a lot of things. About safety, about risk, about what it meant to build a life worth living. After dinner, Jamie went inside to play video games. Adrian and Elena stayed on the porch, watching the last light fade over the lake. "This is nice," Elena said. "Quiet. I can see why you came here. It saved me. This place. After everything fell apart, I needed somewhere I could disappear. And now? Now I think I'm ready to stop disappearing." Elena reached for his hand. Her fingers were warm, certain. "Good. Because I'm getting pretty tired of doing this alone." "Doing what alone?" "Everything. Building, fighting, pretending I don't need anyone." She looked at him. "I came to that dock because I was running. From Victor, from the lawsuit, from the fact that I'd built this empire and still felt empty. And you were just there. Not trying to fix me, not trying to take anything, just showing up and doing the work. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You reminded me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just be present. Be honest. Be real." She squeezed his hand. "I don't want to go back to doing this alone, Adrian. Building things, making decisions, fighting battles. I want to do it with someone. With you. If you want that too." Adrian thought about all the reasons to say no. The complications, the risk, the fact that they'd met in crisis, and maybe what worked in crisis wouldn't work in normal life. Then he thought about his father telling him that what you built with your hands mattered. About Jamie asking if Elena was staying for dinner. About the way she looked at his sketches like they were worth something. "Yeah," he said. "I want that too." She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of promise. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Adrian let himself believe that maybe good things didn't always get stolen. Maybe some things you got to keep. The months rolled forward. Adrian started building his team for Elena's project. Young architects, hungry and talented, who didn't care about his 12-year gap because they cared about the work. He set up an office in town, small, modest, nothing like the firm he'd worked at before. But it was his name on the door, his vision driving the work. Elena split her time between the city and the lake, more and more of it at the lake. She and Jamie formed their own friendship, built on video games and terrible jokes and the kind of easy affection that didn't need explanation. She taught him about business. He taught her about fishing. They both taught Adrian that family didn't have to look one way to be real. The criminal trial happened in September. Adrian testified again, but this time it was easier, clearer. The evidence was overwhelming. Dennis Kramer testified. Rachel Torres testified. 4 other victims testified, each one adding to the weight of proof that Victor Hale had spent 15 years systematically stealing from anyone talented enough to threaten him. The jury came back in 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Victor to 8 years in federal prison, fines that would bankrupt him, the permanent revocation of his architectural license, the complete dismantling of his reputation. Adrian watched it happen from the gallery, Elena beside him. He didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel vindicated, just felt tired and relieved and ready for it to be finished. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how he felt. "I feel like the truth finally caught up," Adrian said, "and that's all I ever wanted." He declined to say more. Let Catherine handle the rest. Went back to the hotel with Elena and flew home the next morning. They didn't talk about Victor on the flight, didn't rehash the trial or discuss appeals or any of it, just talked about the project, about Jamie's upcoming birthday, about whether they should get a dog like Jamie kept asking. Normal things. Future things. Things that mattered more than the past. Construction on Elena's headquarters began in November. Adrian's design had evolved over months of work, something that honored his original vision for Meridian Tower while pushing into new territory. Sustainable materials, innovative climate control, spaces designed for how people actually worked instead of how buildings thought they should work. The groundbreaking was small, just Elena's team, Adrian's team, and a few journalists who'd followed the story. Adrian stood there with a shovel in his hands and thought about his father, about building things that lasted, about work that mattered. When they asked him to say a few words, he kept it simple. 12 years ago, I designed a building and someone stole it. I lost my career, my reputation, everything I'd worked for, and I learned that talent isn't enough, that hard work isn't enough, that sometimes the world's just unfair and all you can do is survive it. He paused, looked at the empty lot that would soon hold something he'd created. But I also learned that survival isn't the end of the story, that you can lose everything and still build something new. That truth might take 12 years to matter, but it still matters. And that the people who show up when you're broken, he glanced at Elena, those are the ones worth keeping. The building went up over 18 months. Adrian was there for most of it, watching his designs become real, solving problems, making changes, doing the work he'd thought he'd lost forever. Elena was there too, not just as the client, but as his partner in every sense that mattered. They'd stopped pretending it was just professional months ago, stopped pretending they weren't building a life together. Jamie adjusted faster than either of them expected, liked having Elena around, liked having someone else to talk to when his dad was buried in blueprints and forgot dinner. Called her Elena, not Mom, but with a familiarity that said she belonged. Sarah called once, 6 months after the trial. Said she'd read about the verdict, about the new project. Wanted to know if Adrian was doing okay. "I'm good," Adrian said. "Really good. I'm glad. I was wrong, about Victor, about you fighting. I thought you were being selfish, but you were just trying to be honest. I was trying to survive." "Yeah, but you did more than that. You won." She paused. "Jamie talks about you a lot, about the building, about Elena. He sounds happy." "He is. Good. That's all I ever wanted, for him to be happy." They didn't talk long, didn't need to. Just two people who'd shared a life once, acknowledging that they'd both moved on to better things. The headquarters building was completed in April, 2 years almost to the day after Adrian had stood on that dock and Elena had asked if she could sit down. The design was everything Adrian had hoped for, functional and beautiful, innovative and timeless. His name was on the dedication plaque. His vision was in every line of the structure. Meridian Tower had made Victor Hale famous. This building would do the same for Adrian. But this time, there was no one to steal it, no one to take credit. Just honest work, honestly claimed. The opening gala was everything Adrian had never wanted, and everything Elena insisted he needed. Hundreds of people, press, politicians, industry leaders who'd ignored him for 12 years suddenly acting like they'd always believed in him. Adrian smiled, shook hands, accepted congratulations. But the moment that mattered came later. He found a quiet corner where he could see the whole main atrium, watched people move through the space he'd created, saw them pause at the windows, admire the light, use the building the way he'd intended. Elena found him there. "Hiding?" she asked. "Observing." "It's beautiful, Adrian. Everything you said it would be. We built it together. You designed it. I just paid for it. You did more than that." He pulled her close. "You gave me a reason to try again, to risk again, to believe that not everyone's out to take something." Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "You gave me something too, "What's that?" "Space. That first morning on the dock. You gave me space when I didn't even know that's what I needed, and then you gave me partnership, trust, a reason to believe that building something with someone doesn't mean losing yourself." They stood there watching the gala, two people who'd found each other in crisis and built something real in the aftermath. Jamie appeared, tugging on Adrian's sleeve. "Dad, there's a lady asking about the fish thing, the one that recycles water. She wants to know if you can explain it." Adrian smiled. "I can explain it. She's really interested, like asking a million questions." "That's good. Questions are good." They left the quiet corner and went back into the crowd. Adrian explained the sustainable water system to a journalist who actually cared, talked about his design philosophy with architects who wanted to learn, introduced Jamie to everyone as his son, with pride and certainty. And at the end of the night, when the guests had left and the building was quiet, the three of them stood in the atrium looking up at the ceiling Adrian had designed to let in natural light. "Is this place going to be famous?" Jamie asked. "Maybe," Adrian said. "I don't know. But people will know you made it, right? They won't say someone else did it." "No, this one's mine. Everyone knows it's mine." Jamie nodded, satisfied, then looked between Adrian and Elena. "Are we going home now?" Elena glanced at Adrian. He looked back. The lake house was still home, still the place where all of this had started. But somewhere over the last 2 years, home had expanded, become less about location and more about the people you shared it with. "Yeah," Adrian said. "We're going home." They drove back in comfortable silence. Jamie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement. Elena's hand rested on Adrian's knee. The road unwound in front of them, familiar and certain. When they pulled into the driveway, the workshop light was on. Adrian had left it that way deliberately, a beacon marking the place where he'd rebuilt his life from scraps. Inside the house, Adrian carried Jamie to bed. His son barely stirred, just mumbled something about fish and buildings before settling back into sleep. Elena was waiting in the kitchen when Adrian came back down, not doing anything, just standing there looking out the window at the lake. "Stay," Adrian said. She turned. "What?" "Stay. Not just tonight, not just weekends. Stay." "Adrian, I know we've been taking it slow. I know there are logistics to figure out, but I'm tired of slow. I'm tired of careful. I want you here. Jamie wants you here. This place, this life, it's better with you in it." Elena crossed the kitchen, stood close enough that Adrian could see the emotions moving across her face. Hope, fear, certainty. The same things he was feeling. "I'm not easy to live with," she said. "I work too much. I'm controlling. I have trouble trusting people. I fix things instead of talking about them. I withdraw when I'm scared. I've spent 12 years learning how to be alone." "So we're both disasters." "Pretty much." She smiled, actually smiled. "Then I guess we might as well be disasters together." She kissed him, longer this time, deeper, full of promise and commitment, and the terrifying certainty of choosing someone even when you didn't know how it would end. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was still smiling. "I'll need to keep my place in the city, for work." "Okay. And I'm not getting rid of my independence. I built my company alone. That doesn't change." "Wouldn't want it to. And if this doesn't work, if we try and it falls apart, I need to know we'll be okay. That Jamie will be okay." Adrian understood what she was really asking. She'd lost too much to people she'd trusted. Needed to know that this, whatever they were building, wouldn't destroy them both if it failed. "We'll be okay," he said. "Whatever happens, we'll be okay." Elena nodded, believed him. Or chose to believe him, which was close enough. That night they sat on the back porch like they had dozens of times before. But this time felt different, less temporary, more like the beginning of something that might actually last. "Tell me something," Elena said after a while. "If you could go back to before Meridian Tower, before Victor, before all of it, would you do anything differently?" Adrian thought about it, about the young architect who'd trusted the wrong person, who'd signed contracts without reading them carefully enough, who'd believed talent was sufficient armor against the world. "I'd read the contracts more carefully," he said. "I'd protect myself better. But I wouldn't not try. I wouldn't play it safe just because playing it safe might hurt less. Even knowing what it would cost you? Even knowing that. Because the alternative, never designing Meridian Tower, never pushing myself, never risking, that would have cost me more, just in ways I wouldn't have noticed until it was too late." Elena leaned against him. "I think that's what I learned from all this. That playing it safe isn't actually safe, it's just slow death. Real safety, real strength comes from knowing you can lose everything and still rebuild. That survival's not about avoiding damage. It's about knowing you can take the damage and keep going." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so wise?" "About the same time you stopped being so scared." They sat there until the sky started to lighten, until dawn painted the lake in shades of gold and pink that made everything look possible, until Jamie's voice called from inside asking if anyone was making breakfast. Life continued after that. Not perfect, not easy, but real in ways that mattered. Adrian's career rebuilt itself slowly. More projects, more clients, a reputation based on his actual work instead of stolen credit. He never got as famous as Victor had been, didn't want to, just wanted to do good work and have people know it was his. Elena's company thrived. The headquarters building became a showcase for what she could do. Brought in new clients, new opportunities, new challenges she tackled with Adrian beside her. Jamie grew up in a house full of blueprints and business calls and two people who loved him and each other enough to make it work even when it was hard. Victor served his sentence in federal prison. Adrian didn't visit, didn't write, didn't waste any more energy on the man who'd stolen 12 years of his life. Just let the legal system handle it and moved on with building something better. Some of the other victims rebuilt their careers too. Rachel Torres started her own firm in Seattle, specializing in sustainable housing. She sent Adrian a card when her first project broke ground, thanked him for showing her that fighting back was possible. Others didn't, couldn't. The damage was too deep, too permanent. Adrian thought about them sometimes, about the unfairness of a system where telling the truth didn't always equal justice, where some people won and some people lost, and all of them paid a price just for trying. But he also thought about what his father used to say, that you built things not because they'd last forever, but because building mattered, because the work itself had value beyond recognition or reward. Meridian Tower still stood in Chicago, still carried Victor's name in old articles and architectural records. The courts had restored Adrian's authorship legally, but changing every reference, every history, every database, that was impossible. Some lies were too embedded to fully erase. Adrian made peace with that. The building existed. He designed it. The people who mattered knew the truth. That was enough. 5 years after the trial, on a Sunday afternoon in late summer, Adrian stood on the dock, the same one he'd been repairing the morning Elena first appeared. Jamie was 16 now, teaching a friend how to fish. Elena was at the house, working on plans for her next project. The dock was solid. Adrian had rebuilt it piece by piece over the years, replacing every rotted board until nothing of the original remained. But it was still the same dock, still the place where everything had changed. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Cross? My name is David Chen. I'm an architecture student. I just read about your case, about Meridian Tower. I'm working on a project about intellectual property theft in the industry, and I was hoping to interview you. Would you be willing to talk?" Adrian stared at the message. Another student, another person who wanted to understand what had happened, who wanted to learn from his story. He could ignore it, could protect his privacy, could avoid dredging up the past one more time. But he thought about Rachel Torres, about the 3 other victims who testified, about everyone still carrying the weight of someone else's theft. He typed back, "Call me tomorrow. I'll tell you what I know." Because maybe that was the lesson in all of this. Not that justice always won or that truth always prevailed, but that telling the story mattered, that sharing what you'd survived helped other people survive their own battles, that the work of building, whether buildings or lives or hope, was never really finished. You just kept showing up, kept doing what needed doing, kept making space for the truth, even when the truth was hard. Jamie called from down the dock, "Dad, come look at this." Adrian pocketed his phone and walked toward his son, toward the future, toward whatever came next. The sun was warm on his shoulders. The lake was calm. And somewhere in the distance, Elena was laughing at something, probably Jamie's terrible joke, probably something that made no sense but mattered anyway. Adrian had lost 12 years to Victor Hale's lies, had spent another 2 years fighting to reclaim what was stolen, had built and rebuilt his life more times than he could count. But standing there on that dock, watching his son fish and knowing the woman he loved was waiting in the house behind him, Adrian realized something important. Victor had taken the credit, had stolen the recognition, had cost Adrian his career and his marriage and years of peace. But he hadn't taken the talent, hadn't taken the ability to create, hadn't taken the core of who Adrian was. That had always been there, waiting, ready to rebuild whenever Adrian found the courage to try again. And he had tried, and failed, and tried again, and built something real from the wreckage. That was the story worth telling. Not the theft, not the fight, not even the victory, just the simple, stubborn refusal to let someone else's damage become your entire story. Jamie appeared at his side, grinning. "You should have seen it, Dad. Almost had him." "Almost counts," Adrian said. "Think we'll catch one before dinner?" "Maybe, maybe not, but we'll keep trying." Elena emerged from the house, called down to ask if anyone was hungry. Jamie looked at his father. Adrian looked back. "Is she staying for dinner?" Jamie asked, even though he already knew the answer, even though Elena had been staying for dinner every night for 3 years now. But he asked anyway. Because some questions weren't really about the answer. They were about the asking, about acknowledging that the good things in life, the real things, deserve to be noticed, appreciated, chosen again and again. Adrian smiled. "Yeah," he said, watching Elena wave from the porch, watching the light catch her hair just right, watching his son laugh at nothing and everything. "She's staying," And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Adrian didn't think about the past or worry about the future, didn't calculate risks or measure losses. He just stood there in the moment and let himself be happy. That was enough. That was everything.